This is Bones Howe, who had been the recording engineer on many GRANZ-produced albums in the late 50s.
Years later, I saw him on the street in Beverly Hills and stopped him and said hello to him. And I was hurt that he was so bitter about the business, you know, because I was saying, God, we had such a good time doing that, and I learned so much on those sessions. And, you know, I'm a producer now, and da-da-da. And he just was very bitter about the structure of the music business. And it wasn't great in those days, but it certainly wasn't as bad as it is now. I was sorry that he felt that way, because I thought he made such a huge contribution, and I was sorry that he couldn't, you know, revel in that in some way. I mean, certainly what he left, the legacy, is gigantic.
There was an increased bitterness at the end of his life, and he felt that recognition in America came very late. So I think that when he was honored, he did not go to the various celebrations that took place. The jazz was everything to him and everything to his life. He felt that there was something that he was still able to do in his life in terms of making deals in the art world that was no longer quite the same situation when it came to jazz. A new generation had taken over. He was no longer at the center of things. When it came to the art world, he felt that he still had a role to play, and a very central one. When it came to jazz, it was a little bit the past already in his mind.
Olivier Berggruen, author, broadcaster, and musician Benny Green, who died in 1998, had been a close friend since the late 50s. In 1987, he described the GRANZ he knew.
Norman actually has a tremendous diversification of interest. He knows as much about modern painting as he does about jazz. He's a great collector and is friends with lots of the world-famous painters. He has an obsessional interest in literature, P.G. Wodehouse, for instance, and has a complete set of Wodehouse's books. Norman has a real student's interest in cooking and food. I mean, he will actually take courses and lessons, and he'll go thousands of miles to find out how to make a dish. So he does have these other interests, but I think that he doesn't display them to the outside world. The outside world sees him backstage at concerts or in a recording studio. He does have a very full and interesting life of another kind. Norman Granz is the kind of man, I believe, that would have been outstanding whatever he'd chosen to do. There are a few people like that. If he'd have gone into the stock exchange or politics or architecture, whatever it was, he'd have been the one of his generation, the same as he was in jazz. He's just one of those guys.
Benny Green. Through the 1990s, Norman Granz began to succumb to the aging process. As a result, he didn't attend a number of ceremonies given in his honor, preferring to remain close to home in Geneva with his third wife, Greta, whom he married in the early 70s. He refused to accept the National Academy of Recorded Arts and Sciences Lifetime Achievement Award in 1994. 5 years later, he was the recipient of Jazz at Lincoln Center's Lifetime Achievement Award, with Oscar Peterson accepting it in New York on behalf of his ailing friend.
When Norm had cancer, when he knew he had cancer, and he phoned me, he said, "This is Norm," very brusque. "I have the big C." I said, "Where are you calling from?" "From Switzerland." And first I didn't know what the big C meant, and he said, "Cancer." And he told me that he's working on his will to distribute his money, and he was going to send me some. I said, "Okay." And he sent me $10,000, and then later he sent $10,000 again. To this day, I don't know why, with his relatives and all, and his obligations, why he chose me. There were no strings attached, but he said, "I want you to spend it on caviar."
Archie Green. In May of 2001, Granz biographer Tad Hershorn flew to Geneva from his home in New Jersey for 3 days of further interviews with his subject.
I don't care about posterity. I don't care about what I accomplish, if anything. I don't mind while I'm capable physically of answering certain important questions if I can. I'm not going to live more than a few months.
Benny Carter had been filling me in that Norman was getting weaker and weaker, so I knew that. Very often his wife would answer the phone when you'd call, and this time Norman answered the phone. And I said, "Hi, Norman." I said, "This is Virginia." And he said, "Goodbye, Virginia," and hung up. And I was devastated. I thought, oh my God, he hung up on me. And I called Benny Carter right away, and I was almost in tears. And I said, "Benny," I said, this just happened. And Benny says, "Don't you realize he's telling you something? He's saying goodbye." So in looking back at it, of course, I thought that was exactly like Norman would do. He would just say goodbye and hang up on you. He was gone a couple of days after that.
Virginia Wicks. And this is singer Margaret Whiting, whom GRANZ once called his second favorite singer after Ella.
Everybody adored Norman because he was an honest and a kind man, and he made great records. Cool. That's the word for Norman, cool.
I happen to like the jam session because I'm a great believer in the role of the individual in any art. And I don't think it's difficult to argue that each day we have more and more conformity in our lives and less opportunity for the individual, whether it be in the state politically, whether it be in business economically, with the conglomerates, which we didn't have, say, 30 years ago. And the same with music, you see. Now that it's passed almost in certain areas to the engineer, to the mixer, to the business side of it. And I really feel that jazz as I know it will vanish, because where is the young player going to get an apprenticeship? Where is he going to go sit in? Where is he even going to get a sound playing in the band? There won't even be any bands. You know, in the days when the trumpet player, for instance, played, we'll take Basie, the brass section swung totally without the rhythm section. And each man had to get a sound. Ella Fitzgerald had to fight the whole Chick Webb band every time she sang. And this was healthy. Billy did the same. Even Sarah had time before it stopped to sing with a big band. How can a young girl, 18 today, even come up with it? I'm not saying that what she is coming up with isn't valid, you see. But that's all right. You have automobiles today, but then people still buy 1960 automobiles and say, my God, look how the great craftsmanship, etc. So it's not looking backwards or being nostalgia. It's a question of standards. I'm a great believer in the individual, as I say, and I think we're in such an era of conformity that I don't know how how the environment in the future can nurture the individual.
Norman Granz died in Geneva on the 22nd of November, 2001. He was 83. In 1952, I wrote in Downbeat magazine, "Forget his involvement with the music for a moment and concentrate on the fact that he makes every effort not to play his Jazz at the Philharmonic groups before segregated audiences. If he personally prospers from this courageous stand, so much the better." Well, he did prosper. This committed, intelligent, tough as nails, irascible, generous, straight-talking, tennis-playing, art collector, Norman Granz, the primary force behind so much of lasting value in 20th century jazz and popular music. That's a hell of a legacy. Out of the Norm has been a Demas production for BBC Radio 2. The series was written and compiled by Elliot Meadow and produced by Nick Lowe, assisted by Dougie Campbell and Tad Hershorn. I'm Nat Hentoff, and this is Oscar Peterson.
If anyone doesn't know what Norman Granz has done for jazz now, then they shouldn't be listening to jazz. Mr. GRANZ?
Remember that same intro, note for note. You hear that, Billie Holiday?
Trouble is a man.
All right, quiet. All right, roll. 2449.